this beautiful fall day. Well, first I want to start by saying what a night we had last night.
Wow.
Such an incredible fall party. It was light up the night. So we had trunk or treat, a lot of games for the kids.
You sound like an exaggerator if you're like best ever, but
it was really, really
everybody
good.
was saying that.
Yeah, it was really good. The chili was a hit, and Michelle Johnson won the chili.
We had some good
chili contest.
There was, and it was a lot of variation.
Yes.
But
very good.
Yeah.
It was just a great night. We had a lot of guests. We had a lot of I don't know. I just think it's an amazing time for us to come together. The world has made Halloween such a holiday, which I don't even call it that.
Yeah.
It just makes me mad, so I don't even like to call it a holiday.
Hell's holy day.
Yeah, I mean, and the world has really taken off with that. But wow, we had light up the night last night, and I felt like we did. I felt like we lit up the night, and it was just, we even got to have our bonfire. I'm glad the rain held off, and it was just a thank you for everyone that was a part. It was incredible.
So true.
Even Sister Culver couldn't be there with her famous cider, but she was so gracious to share her recipe with Sister Julie Thornton, who did an amazing job of replicating. So it was great. Did you all have a good time at your concert last night? They went, and I didn't want to hear from you.
Oh,
they went and heard Amy Grant last night.
That was awesome. That's awesome.
I mean, Amy Grant goes way back because I loved Amy Grant as well. I mean, I know you thought she was, yeah, I know.
That's awesome.
Hey, I'm glad you had posters of Amy Grant. I think that's amazing. That beats
For real.
Wonder Woman. I don't know who was back in your era, but I mean, your era was, I don't know if it was my era, but.
That's exactly who I was thinking, bro.
I knew they were going to pull it out.
That's exactly who I was. That's hilarious. That was the exact person.
So we're glad it was Amy Grant on your wall. And thank you, Carolyn, for taking him. That was really awesome. I loved Amy Grant.
Listen to this. When I first got into church, there was a group of people that knew that I was trying to serve the Lord from high school. And they said, let's go down to the state fair. Remember the state fair was in DuQuoin, Illinois. And Brother Culver and I are both from Illinois. And we went down to the state fair to watch Amy Grant.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I had her music books because I would try to play her stuff on the piano.
Right.
So
part of my sanctification was learning how to have a Christian crush.
I love it. A Christian crush. Did you call it a crush back then? I don't think we called it a crush.
Know.
I don't know what we called it.
I don't know. But who wasn't crushing on Amy Grant? That's the question.
Yeah. Amy Grant. And she's still around and still singing, which is pretty amazing. I mean, her and Michael W. Smith, the two of them are like
for real.
icons. It's crazy. Yeah. So anyway, this is not what we're discussing today. We're not discussing anything about Halloween or Amy Grant. So we're going to totally switch gears right here. This is going to be an amazing day today because we're going to talk in Life Talks a little bit about the geopolitical crisis of Israel, which includes the world. But we're not going to get into a lot of the prophetic of that today in Life Talks because Pastor's message today is going to hit all of that. So we're not going to go there. Of course, it's going to be a little difficult not to go there at some point because that's kind of what it is. But it's going to be a great topic today. So we want your questions, though. Please, even if you have questions on prophecy, whatever, go ahead and send them, and we'll probably say, hey, we're going to hold off on this question because he's probably going to hit that in his sermon today.
And we need their questions because we don't have notes.
Right. I wrote
Is this our first time ever doing a Life Talk without notes?
Definitely for me. I would say absolutely because that's not my thing. So, yes.
We need one of our panelists need their mic on. One of our panelists need their mic on.
He's got the MC mic. So I guess we'll start with just talking about Israel and why is this such a big deal? I mean, we have seen a lot of wars around the world.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen Ukraine happening, but even Ukraine doesn't touch what's happening in Israel right now and with the world. And so,
that's a good point.
I mean, we heard about it, and it's all over the news, and we heard.
I think in some ways,
Israel.
the Ukraine war is worse.
Yeah.
because it's all within the boundaries of Israel. This current geopolitical crisis, that was a cross-border.
Yeah.
I mean, that was two sovereign nations, and I mean that was a big deal. And nuclear threat on both of them.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So both of them have nuclear capacity. So from a just a purely what's the word I'm looking for? Like a war, a logistical perspective. You would think that the Ukraine-Russian war would be a bigger
Right.
deal. I mean, it was a big deal, obviously.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But it feels different. I mean, we went through the Cold War, right? We're talking about going back to our younger days. So, and that was a big deal. But this just feels different. So, I'm just going to let you take it away, talking about where we're at right now.
Yeah. Well, I think, okay, so as she said, I'm gonna preach more about the prophetic part, the prophecies, and what do the prophecies mean, and what are the significance. And man, yesterday I sent out some notes to some of my friends, some pastors that I've got that I know study these kinds of things, and they were studying them. So I sent out some questions that I had about some prophetic stuff, that is pretty interesting, and I'm just trying to walk my way through what some of the ramifications of that is. And so anyway, I think when we look at this, so anyway, I'm preaching the prophecy part of it during my message. We want to talk about, as you said, the geopolitical crisis element and why this is such a big deal. What is it? What's the perspective? What should our perspective be? I think let's just lay the groundwork a little bit here. You've got this little nation, really, that's
How big is Israel?
20, what Brother Rensel was, 26 miles across and 80 miles long or something like that. It's about the size of what, Rhode Island?
I mean, that's tiny. That is tiny for
Yeah.
I think the world is thinking about that tiny of a little space.
I think that's the thing. Yeah, I think that's the thing. Like Afghanistan is bigger. Why is the world thinking about this one space? And I heard somebody recently talking about the fact that it's the only place in the world that 3 continents touch. Europe, Asia, and Africa all touch at that place, which is interesting because you hear some of the language, and when you listen to some of the language, you kind of know somebody's sort of their either socio-political or socio-religious perspective when they use the term like Levant, so the word Levant would be kind of like to remove any impact that Israel as the owner of its land would have. In other words, it's a land bridge. It's the Levant, and which is so the reason why that's important, if you think about like what was first ISIS, or what became ISIS was first actually ISIL, right? It was the Islamic State. What was the I for? Islamic State something, and the Levant was actually ISIL. If you remember, even Barack Obama mentioned sometimes when he would refer to it, he would use the term Levant, and he would also talk about ISIL. Yeah. Which was why some people, when he would use the term Levant, that's why some people said, well, I know that he says he's a Christian, but he's secretly a Muslim, because it's a decharacterization of Israel to just this insignificant landmass. So anyway, you got those. There's a lot of those components. But here it is. Like, here's Israel in the middle of all of this, and it's a really big focal point. And I think that some of the things that make it interesting are the fact that there's so much social perspective about it. You look at so let's look at the attacks right now, like what happened in Israel. You look at the Hamas attacks, and there were a lot of Ivy League colleges and students and stuff like that who actually signed a pro-Palestinian statement in favor of, and so you see some of these people. This is interesting because you see some of these people like Greta Thunberg or whatever her name is, who's like, sort of the face of the global warming social movement, the global warming movement. And so she comes out and has some pretty anti-Semitic things that she had to pull down from her Twitter and whatever. And it was, and there, a lot of it is sort of this free Gaza type language. And these people, even to the point where somebody like Bill Maher, who's an Ivy League educated guy who has an HBO program that is a million miles, he's a million miles away from being conservative, but he's been, in fairness, he's been pretty, he's also been pretty critical of the Democrat Party or the liberal movement and some of their hypocrisy and inconsistencies. He has been, some fair in that in some way. He basically said to go to an Ivy League college today makes a person stupid. And he was, and what he's referring to, the reference here is a reference that specifically addresses this idea that says, like in the back of your mind, you're like, how in the name of heaven could somebody sign a paper from Ivy League colleges or whatever that say we're in favor of the terrorists? I mean, Hamas has been a terror organization for 20 years. It's not like the BBC. Here's another example. The BBC had a deal where there was where their editor-in-chief sent out a bulletin to all of their reporters and all of their story writers saying, don't use the word terrorist organization when we refer to Hamas. And I was actually listening to a woman from the Canadian Parliament who was speaking about this very topic, and she's like, what are you talking? No, it wasn't the BBC. It was the CBC, the Canadian version of the BBC. And it was like, what are you talking about? It's been on the UN terror list for 20 years. Like the UN, which is far from being a pro-Israel organization. Right. So I just think this is important as we, as we look at this and think through this, that there's something more to it than just simply the where it sits in relationship to the world, its importance, where like the concentration of a lot of the world's oil is, or it's more than it just simply as a U.S. ally. There's more to it. And the more you see the social trends of the world become unbiblical or anti-biblical, the more you find them becoming anti-Israel. The people who are the most anti-biblical, pro-abortion, the people that you start seeing that are the more anti-biblical they become, the more anti-Israel they become, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah. And regardless of, the history and the complexity of, what's going on over there, it's just impossible to ignore the fact that it is just simply bizarre that this little landmass draws so much attention. It just has to be a spiritual dynamic. There's just no way around it. It's a spiritual dynamic. And I think the thing, going back into Israel's history here and even into the biblical history, a lot of times people like to they like to separate the dynamic of the Jewish ancestry, Jewish heritage from the land discussion. But biblically, Israel's identity is tied to that land. And so
which is the probably the, and it is a complex scenario, because for imagine, you know, imagine that there were natives to a place who were sent out and dispelled and dispersed, but it had been their land for 1,000+ years in history. Yeah. And they get and so then like the Roman Empire comes in and basically AD 70 pushes them all out. and there's this massive like destruction of Jerusalem. They burned the city walls with fire. The people start fleeing, and it is biblical prophecy that they go throughout the entire world. Yeah. But biblical prophecy says that God is going to bring them back. I got to be careful because this is part of my message. But God is going to bring them back to this land. And so you, as a Christian, you can. So today we're talking about, as a Christian, what should our perspective be? As a Christian, even though it is complex, and I understand it's complex, and I understand that there were people that were living there during that period of time, that the Jews were dispersed. They didn't have an army. They couldn't go back and repatriate the land that was theirs. Right. So when they do, obviously they're going to be people will be like, wait, what are you doing stealing our land? Yeah. Well, in a world where have you ever seen the map where it shows the Muslim countries around and Israel, this little bitty dot? And you've got all those Muslim countries, which is funny because when I was in Israel, one of the things that they discussed was isn't it funny how that you've got Iran and Iraq and Saudi Arabia and and we just Lebanon and Syria and Turkey and Egypt and Jordan and the UAE, and I mean, like,
Israel really stinks
Qatar,
at colonizing.
Yeah, and Qatar and all that stuff. And I remember I was in Israel and they showed a map, and they showed this map, and they said, this is Israel, and this is a to scale map. This is Israel, and why is the world saying that that Israel doesn't have a right to be there, even from a geopolitical perspective? Like, as Christians, we look at it and we go, dude, duh. Go back in the Bible and look. I mean, God gave Abraham the land. God's God. He said, this is a land. I'm going to give it to you. When they came out of Egypt, they came and occupied that land all the way to AD 70. So you look at this and you go, it was their land. They have a right to that land. But then when you look at the bigger picture and you look at all of these countries, this massive amount of Muslim countries all around there, it just speaks to how weird and strange it is that the anti-Israel sentiment of some world posture is, well, they need to give up part of this land in the Gaza Strip and all of this stuff. And people talking about they need to go back to the pre-1967 borders. I was at the Sea of Galilee, and they pointed out and they said the 1967 borders, he said, was at the brow of that hill. He said the Syrians would literally sit at the brow of the hill and they would shoot missiles down to the cities around the Sea of Galilee. He said it was only little bitty villages and there was very few people that were living there because it was so dangerous. And he said, and the Sea of Galilee is actually the water supply for Jerusalem, and they had to make underground bunkers for their pumping stations and stuff like that, because the Syrians would stand on the brow of the hill and shoot missiles trying to destroy. They've tried to poison the water. They tried to, whatever. And so the
chaos inducing.
Right? And so the people that say they need to go back, so the 1967 war, where they expanded their borders to what they called defensible borders or defendable borders, They pushed it back to the point where they said, now at least we can defend ourselves. And so if you go back to pre-1960s, and there's some nations and people groups and whatever pushing for, they need to go back to pre-1967 borders, and it's not even feasible, first. Second, you've got the Gaza Strip deal, where people are like, well, you got to give Palestinians part of the land. That was part of, whatever. So Israel does it and literally allows, which goes back to some of the issue about the border wall stuff, and I know that's a big hot topic with Trump and all, but the question is, how many terrorists and how many, Iranian terror cells have been caught coming through our southern border. What happens if they set up right next to you? What happens if a terror cell sets up and the world says, no, 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 no. You've got to give Beaver Creek to those terror cells. I understand that there are Palestinians living there. I understand that there are Palestinians living there. But the terror cells set up in those places, and they set up I was there. I was there. They set up I was in Gaza. We went to Gaza, right? And they set up their ammunition places in schools. They set up their munitions dumps in hospitals. And they do all these things, and they use human screens. Why? Because of it. The problem isn't the Palestinian people that live there. I watched Palestinian people go through security checkpoints into Jerusalem to work from Gaza. They're not the problem. The problem is the terror cells.
Isn't it strange it seems strange to me that the world is so woke. And I mean, we're going back saying that we need to give funds to people that had slavery in their genealogy, whatever, give them money. Reparations. I mean, talking about the Indians and this
indigenous
was their
land.
Yes.
Recap.
But yet for this, it's like, wait a minute, we're woke on everything else except Israel.
Let's let indigenous Israelis recapture
don't
their
you think
land.
The world would say, all right,
it's
let's
not it's not ideologically consistent. The only consistent ideology is anti-God.
That's it, right? That's what it is. And the thing about it is, so today our question for LifeTalks today, the topic for LifeTalks. Funny, we only have 17 minutes left.
Quick, we got to talk about then our position as believers, right?
Yeah.
We got to get that, because here's the deal. You're going to have people come to you that say, what's going on? What's going on? And we've got it. This is a perfect conversation starter to be able to talk to people, right? And so we need to talk about our missional conversation when it comes to this, because it's going to happen. It's already happened to people. So,
all right. So as disciples, we have to let Jesus change what we care about. Okay? As disciples, we have to let Jesus change what we care about. That means that our way of viewing the world has to become the way God views the world. We cannot have a worldview that's informed by our secular biases. Does that make sense? Right? We can have a worldview that's informed by our secular biases. And here's the deal. As believers and as a redeemed community, we're a transformed community. And we're not just God's redeemed people, we're God's redeeming people. We're called to redeem that which Satan wants to create chaos to, which goes back to this whole deal. What's the devil want to do? God made a world. He made a world and created cosmos. And so Satan's job is to create uncosmos. Yeah. So we were talking in the green room before this about the chaos creatures of the scriptures. And so you start reading about the chaos creatures, and one of the chaos creatures was that there's going to be a great lion that's going to come, and it's going to come in and it's going to destroy Israel, and it's going to wreak havoc on the land, and blah blah blah. But then God's going to come, and He's going to smite the great lion, and the great lion is going to be turned into a scrawny, broken down thing that's living in this. And he talks about this land that the lion comes from is going to be a land of rivers and fertility and blah blah blah. But God's going to smite that land, and it's going to become a wasteland, and that lion's going to roam in the wasteland. And so we read these scriptures. These are scriptures like in Ezekiel and Jeremiah and whatever. And we read these scriptures, and sometimes as Americans we literalize them, but it's actually mystic poetry. And so there wasn't a lion that came Like it wasn't like this great pride of lions that came in and started destroying the land. It was Babylon. And so what did God say? God said, I'm going to make Babylon a wasteland, and that great lion is going to, so the chaos creature is going to go. He says, so I'm going to use the chaos creature to create chaos in judgment of my people. Then I'm going to smite the land, and I'm going to smite that lion, and I'm going to create that fertile field and make it a wilderness. And that wilderness is going to be what? It's going to be, that's another imagery of chaos. The unordered, fertile place that God tried, because so God takes the unordered, chaotic world and makes a Garden of Eden. Satan tries to take the Garden of Eden and make it a chaotic world. And so the chaos creatures so we're thinking like the chaos creatures are going to come, like I was talking about the locusts. I'm going to send a great army of locusts, and the great army of locusts are going to come and they're going to destroy the land. Don't be looking for locusts. Like don't be looking for a bug. He's not sending locusts. Locusts are imagery in the scripture of chaos creatures. In other words,
think of the plagues in Egypt.
Right.
Decreation.
Right.
The whole story of the 12 plagues is the Jewish mind, they would have seen it in a way we didn't see it. They saw it as decreation. Right. The opposite of what happened in creation.
God was creating chaos in Egypt. He was allowing the chaos to come to Egypt so that his people could be ordered back to the place that they were.
And by the way, Pharaoh's headdress, if you study history, it was a headdress with a snake on it.
Which is a chaos creature.
Chaos creature. Think back to the garden, right?
Right. They're chaos creatures. So what does God do? God uses their chaos creature against them. What is in your hand? It's a rod. He throws it down, it turns into a serpent. He picks it back up, it's a serpent. He goes into Pharaoh's court, throws it down, it becomes a serpent. What's he do? What's God do? He leverages their chaos creature against them.
And he consumes chaos with order, which the Jewish mind would have seen creation as God establishing order out of chaos. We go into a lot there.
There it is.
But that's a helpful conversation to think about today. So instead of trying to weed into the geopolitical complexity and trying to navigate the complexities of, well, what is the bear imagery in Revelation? Right. How about we have conversations with people about God's ultimate plan?
There it is.
And about how chaos, the spiritual darkness, wars against God's order.
That's why Israel's an issue. That's why Israel's an issue. That's why it's a big deal. That's why it's not just simply a geopolitical scenario. It's because Israel is the image, has been the image. And we believe, by the way, we as New Testament believers believe that from the day of Pentecost forward, the only way that you get into covenant with God doesn't have a dual covenant system. The only way that you get in covenant with God in the New Testament is through Jesus Christ. But these are covenant people that still have covenant promises based on the old covenant that's related to a restoration of a people. And even in the book of Romans, Paul says, don't get proud to think that Israel, because he said blindness has occurred to Israel in part for your good, so that the wild olive branch could be grafted in. And so you got grafted in, but don't forget the stump that supports you is that. Yeah. So as believers, we have to look at it and say, look, the stump that supports us, the root, I preached a couple weeks ago, remember? The root that grew out of the sucker sprout is what the word is. The sucker sprout that grew up out of the stump that was cut down was the Messiah. And so what happens? What is that language and imagery? We're looking at like what tree got cut down, and what is he talking about? That his axe is in his hand at the root, and what are we talking about here? It's chaos imagery. You got to understand. You can't look at it and say, okay, how is this literally going to happen? How is this literally going to? That's why I said you can't look at that locusts are going to come in, because what was the army of locusts that came in? It was the Assyrians. The Assyrians were the locusts with the cheek teeth of a lion. And we know that because Joel prophesies and says in the last days, or just ahead of his statement, in the last days I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh. What does he say? I will make Israel no longer a curse among the nations. And he says, and I will restore unto you the years. That what? Let's go back and let's figure what were the four chaos creatures. The palmer worm, the canker worm, the caterpillar, and the locust. I will restore unto you the years that the palmer worm and the canker worm and the caterpillar and the locust have eaten.
Everything chaos decreated, I will create. I will order.
That's why Israel matters. Because the spirit of Antichrist is a spirit of decreation.
Yes.
The spirit
of
Antichrist, who is the Prince of Peace. And when we say peace, we're like, remember, y'all, listen, please don't tell me that you have forgotten already the whole Shalom series that I did. When I talked about shalom, how long did I talk about shalom? And I said, shalom isn't just simply the absence of conflict. Shalom is everything as it should be. Shalom is perfection or completeness. God is working things toward completeness. He's working things toward order. He's working to make everything as it should be. Just like he said in the beginning when he made the world and he created the world and he stops and he looks and he goes, it is good. That word.
Tob.
Huh? Yeah, it's a word of shalom. It's a word of everything as it should be. It's a word of all of this that is made is exactly as I planned it. So what is God doing? God's working toward reordering the world around Jesus Christ, who is the Prince of Peace.
Who has the key of David.
So in Revelation chapter 3, when he says to the Philadelphian church, I know that you have a little bit of strength, but I want you to know, he says that you have held on to the faith, and because of that, he says, because you have a little bit of strength, he says, I am the one who has the key to the tabernacle of David, and I will open a door that no man could shut, and I'll shut a door that no man could open. What is God doing? Through Jesus Christ, who is the head of the church, so then therefore through the church, which is why we say you're God's redeeming people. Not just God's redeemed people, but God's redeeming the world through you and I. What does that mean? He's creating peace where chaos was. He's creating order through Jesus Christ in your life and the lives of your neighborhood and the people around you. You should be order-inducing people.
Tonight in Sydney, I was intending to preach on the spiritual fruit of goodness. That's what that is.
Yes. So, all right, So as we talk about this, and we talk about Israel, and we talk about what's going on, we have to be able to wrap our brain around. You could have this is why I said, you cannot have a worldview that revolves around your secular bias. All of us have been so stinking infiltrated with secular humanism, which is an antichrist message, right? Listen, this is why plainly, look, I'm unapologetic when I come at these issues. I believe that the devil wants moral righteousness issues that relate to the order of God, issues that relate to God's cosmosing of things according to his best way. The devil wants nothing more than to turn those things into political debate and political banter. And the world, what's the world going to say? Shut up, church. You do church stuff. That's the thing I hate about the church. They're in the political stuff. Why? Because the devil would not want nothing more than to make racism a political debate or hot button or make on and on and on, right? We could go through all this stuff. I'm going to tell you something right now. I told you this morning when we were talking, and I was at the point of tears the whole time I was discussing it, that God lists all the sins of Israel and says, I'm going to punish them. So you got to watch God. He's not going to just put up with this and, well, they're my people. So, God doesn't treat him like sometimes we treat our kids. God said, I'm going to punish them. Why? Because of their wickedness. I went back and read some of their wickedness. It was freaky. I told her, I said, it kind of creeped me out. I was reading the book of Ezekiel, and I was a little bit creeped out. Like, he was like, father-in-laws are having affairs with their daughter-in-laws, and brothers are taking the virginity of their sisters, and blah 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 blah. And he said it was
Chaos.
And so God says, I can't let the chaos continue. But then he turns around. Listen, North American church, listen. But at the same moment, he says, and you have not been righteous in your treatment of the poor. And you have, this is what he said, and you have leveraged your power against the poor. You've leveraged your power against people, and you've become wealthy on the back of people that are impoverished. And and he goes on and on and on. Listen, this is a big deal. God says, because I've called you to be people that demonstrate my better way, which is an ordered way. And so just like their sexual sins were a chaos posture, so was the way they were treating their neighbor. And so as Christians, let me just say, because I want people to get this. I want our church to get this. As Christians, we need to look at it from this perspective that says that Hamas is a chaos creature. Yeah. That our position doesn't need to be like informational. This is why I haven't preached a whole lot of prophecy stuff down through the years, because Christians, you got like Perry Stone and these guys that are on TV, and they do, everything they do is prophecy. And it's a bunch of Christians watching the prophecy, just getting more information and whatever. I understand it's important, but I want to know, is it going to affect us in a way that's not just simply like, well, I have a well-informed position on biblical eschatology now. And you said missional, so maybe go that way.
Okay, well, we only have 2 minutes, so I do want to ask real quick. There's a couple questions. Number one, who was the biblical ancestor of the Palestinians?
I believe it's Ishmael.
Ishmael. Okay. Another comment. This was interesting. This is from Brother Culver, who said, I taught an international terrorist course at Sam Houston State University in August and September.
Actually, last night, Brother Culver, I'm so sorry. Last night, I really felt like I needed to have you on this panel, but I didn't want to throw this on you last minute. And I thank you for the comment. I really seriously wanted, but then I was concerned because I knew it was last minute, and I didn't want to put you in a position to talk about things that because of your position, and I know you know what to talk about and what not to, but anyway, I didn't want to ask you a question and be like, I can't really talk about that.
He said the course dove into regional conflict of state-sponsored terror against regional nation states. More specifically, they looked at the tension of Hamas and Hezbollah against Israel. Wow. So the class ended September 22nd, and the attack on Israel was October 7th. October 7th. We touched on possibilities of proxy wars between Iran and Israel through Hamas and the alignments of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia with Iran through OPEC. That's pretty cool. He said at the time of the class, we had no idea of any planned invasion. We looked at influences on security, economic safety. The only thing that would have made it better was teaching it in the midst of the conflict. That's right. Man, you get to be a real light.
No, for real.
You get to be, because the questions come. People are fearful. People are fearful of everything going on. And so that's
what I think is amazing, because here's Brother Culver in these positions speaking to these kinds of things. Mm-hmm. But he can speak to, and this is what's amazing, because I do believe that we need to have people that are in the middle of the geopolitical discussion. Like, I think there is a geopolitical, like we didn't even have time today to talk about the complication that arises over the fact that Iran is the primary sponsor of Hezbollah, right? Or is that would you say that's Lebanon? I know Hezbollah is in Lebanon mostly. Yeah. So you got Iran, they're kind of the sugar daddy, right? They're like the state sponsor, a lot of this. But then we found out recently that some of the rocket launchers that were used in the terror came from North Korea. So now you've got, they've literally spotted them as North Korean weapons. So now you've got a scenario where you've got the potential connection of, which is why you say, well, that's just a political deal. When you say Biden gave $6 billion to Iran, and then just within weeks, here comes this attack, and but North Korea, and who's North Korea connected to? China. And Iran. Who's Iran connected to? Russia. And I start getting into the whole Gog and Magog thing.
It's global. He said during the spring term, he taught a course that explored defense support of civil authorities. We explored people on the terror watch list coming through our southern borders.
Wow.
I don't know what this means for GFY 203. I just feel so important saying these things. 169 terrorists were apprehended. How many came through undetected? It could be as many as 50% above those that were apprehended. So again, I mean, wow, those are incredible figures. But again, we go back to it's chaos and it's the world we live in, but we have got an answer for that chaos. And what a time to be a light in the darkness. This is our time to shine and to talk to this about peace. Everything as it should be. And when he's in your heart and when you've got him in control of your life, you've got peace.
Are you afraid of the chaos creatures? That's the question.
That is the question.
Are you afraid? If you're afraid of the chaos creatures, then you don't believe that God is in control of the chaos creatures.
Exactly right.
Why does he say to Job, dude, I feel so much anointing right now. Why does he say to Job, where were you when I formed Leviathan? One of the most mysterious chaos creatures of the entire Bible.
Represents decreation itself.
It absolutely represents the original chaotic condition of the sea. Leviathan is sort of this, it's sort of this sea and land creature. Some people say it was like maybe a crocodile. Some people say it was like a sea monster, like you see in the pictures. But anyway, Leviathan is a chaos creature that represents the original chaos of the chaos waters. And he says, where were you when I formed Leviathan? Job, you think your life is in control of the chaos? I made the chaos creatures. I'm in control. Don't ever lose sight of that. You questioned my righteousness and you questioned my judgment. Where were you when I made the chaos creatures? Your little life moment of chaos. And what was he in chaos about? About his life circumstances. And I'm telling you right now, Americans who have had it so good and have had so much wealth and whatever, I'm going to tell you right now, we have a particular vulnerability to being afraid of the chaos creatures, because we're afraid that the chaos creatures are going to come and take what we think gives our life order and security, which is money and houses and jobs. God says, I'm the one with the control of the chaos creatures. So keep yourself in my hand. Make me Lord in your life. This is why this should produce repentance in us.
And why we need the body, because it is collectively that God undoes the chaos through establishing his order, his gifting, his fruit of the Spirit.
Let the peace of God rule in your hearts.
That's incredible. Very good. I think that's a great take on all of this that's going on. I mean, like you said, he was mentioning some of these people that are big into end-time prophecy, and he said they have it, but do they really know? Do we really know? And does it really matter?
Dude, Israel thought they knew, and that because of what they thought they knew, they missed the Messiah.
Yes.
And you had all these Bible prophecy people out there, and all these, whatever, and they're making money on what has become the Christian industry.
Yes.
Christianity has turned into an industry in the Western world. Mm-hmm. It's a capitalistic industry. And they're making money on it, and they're selling their books, and they're doing all their stuff. And there would have been the exact people that would have said, this is what the Messiah's going to look like, this is where he's going to come from, blah, 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 blah. And he came in a whole different way, and they, for the majority, missed him. So don't think that just because you have all of the data and the information, and your pastor did a chart and did a prophecy chart or whatever, that you've got it all figured out, and I've got all the information I need. No. The information you need is of the increase of his government and peace. There will be no end until he orders and establishes his kingdom worldwide in a recreated world.
in that recreated world, will have no sea. Chaos gone.
No chaos creatures. No. Yep.
So repent and be ready. Be ready. All right. Well, we went 6 minutes past, but that's okay. You have time to go fellowship, be with the body, grab a coffee, grab a donut, and we'll see you back here at 11 when we talk more about this in the 11 o'clock service.